Hi, Rob and Range today, so please bear with gunfire you hear in the background. Today is part 2 of our 3-part series on double-action revolvers in their role as concealed carry, personal protection, home defense firearms. And what we're talking about today is reloading. Now, this comes with a caveat that nothing I do today should be inferred as a tutorial. I'm in no way trying to tell you what you should do. I'm just going to demonstrate some techniques that have helped me. There are a lot of different techniques, and I want to discuss 3 of them. The first being the tactical partial reload, second being a complete speed reload when you have a speed loader, and third, a complete speed reload when you don't have a speed loader, you only have loose ammunition. Now, when I mention that third one, people immediately ask, why would you not have a speed loader? There are some reasons for that, including, but not limited to, there are some double-action revolvers for which speed loaders are hard to find. Also, according to the sources I've looked at, there are some jurisdictions and some conditions under which you're prohibited from having speed loaders. And third, the reality that some people just don't have speed loaders. So we're going to show the trying to reload your revolver fast when all you have is loose rounds. But our first technique, the tactical partial reload, what I'm talking about is you get into a situation where you have to fire, but you have not completely exhausted your ammunition. And then, when there's a lull in the action, you get down behind cover, take your cylinder out of battery, push back on your ejector rod just a little bit, and take out those expent rounds. This is, of course, technique sensitive and can be time consuming and requires a lot of practice. Also, you'll notice that I'm doing it while looking at you, not looking at the firearm. Well, of course, instead of looking at you, you should be looking downrange. But the key is observing your surroundings, not looking at your firearm. And then you're completely reloaded. Now let me show you a close-up of that tactical partial reload. You fire a couple of shots, take the cylinder out of battery, push back on the ejector just a little bit, take one round out, and you may have noticed that I touched the end to make sure it was the empty one. Reload one, rotate the cylinder, take one round out, make sure it's the empty one, because remember, I'm not looking at the gun, reload one, and then put your cylinder back into battery. Obviously, that partial reload technique takes a lot of practice, but it's not insurmountable. And you might get into a situation where you're not sure if you fired 2 shots or 3. It's okay if you only reload 2, because having 5 in your revolver beats having 3. And if you've got one empty casing and you don't know where it is in the rotation, that's still okay, because if you fire a couple of shots and then get a click, you know you have more rounds than that. Just pull the trigger again. But if you're in a situation where you're not sure if you fired 6 shots or only 5 because in all the excitement you kind of lost track, then don't worry about maybe throwing 1 live round on the ground. Just reload with your speed loader, because having this on the ground is a lot better than having this in your hand. But while we're on the subject of speed loaders, let's talk about our speed reload with a speed loader technique. Now right now the revolver's empty, but the way this technique will look is I'll fire my last shot, take the cylinder out of battery, and then the revolver will just be in my non-dominant hand, and I'm controlling the cylinder with my thumb and my 2 middle fingers. I'll then turn the muzzle straight up and hit the ejector rod. The muzzle's up because gravity's your pal when you're trying to get those rounds out of there. And you don't push the ejector rod, hit it. Then I'll turn that muzzle down, because again, gravity's my pal when I'm trying to get the rounds in there, while I'm reaching for my speed loader, and I will line the rounds up with the chambers. These are HKS speed loaders, so I'll click it one to the right, the rounds fall into the chambers, just drop the speed loader, close the cylinder. Now in doing this, you'll notice that those went in there fairly easily, even though I was not looking at the gun. But there's a lot of people that have difficulty getting those things lined up. I happen to be one of those people. And although you want to keep looking at what's going on and reload without looking at your firearm, there's sometimes that instead of spending 5 seconds looking downrange while I'm fumbling with this, it might be a better idea to spend 1 second actually looking at your gun and make sure it gets loaded correctly. So now that we've seen that, let's try this technique at full speed. As fast as reloading an autoloader with an extra magazine? Probably not. But it's not too slow, And of course, with a little bit of practice, anybody can do it faster than I can. Now let's try our speed load when you don't have a speed loader. And of course the process starts with shooting your last round, then taking the cylinder out of battery, transferring the revolver into your non-shooting hand, controlling the cylinder with your thumb and middle fingers, turning the muzzle straight up, hitting the ejector rod, and I can't emphasize that enough, hitting the ejector rod, then turning the muzzle down while you're simultaneously reaching into your pocket and grabbing a handful of rounds. Now this is a 6-shot revolver, so people might think, okay, carry 6 rounds in your pocket. I'd say carry 10, because there's a good chance you're going to drop a couple of them. Now this is a fluted cylinder, and I'll have my thumb in one of these grooves so I can keep track of where the chamber is. And I'll load in a round, rotate that by 1, load in another round, rotate by 1, load in another round, until I've got all 6 in here. The problem is, of course, that it requires me to count to 6, and so I'm not fumbling around wondering, did I put in 6, and trying to put in a 7th round. Also, during this process, it is very important that instead of looking at the revolver, you're looking at what's going on. And remember, of course, that even when you only have 2 or 3 rounds in there, if you're still loading and a threat becomes imminent, you can just slap the cylinder shut and go. Now in doing this, some people, rather than carrying rounds in their pocket, will have some kind of cartridge loops on their belt, and that can provide some advantages. They're a little more secure than just having a pocket full of rounds. And also in terms of counting how many rounds you go in, this has all the cartridges arranged in rows of 6, so that I'll continue to load until I have exhausted those 6, and it doesn't require that I count them. Now one of the things we've got going on here is that you'll see that I have this in my left hand. There's a reason for that, and that is if I drop one of these rounds, it might fall on the ground, but it might just fall into my hand, allowing me to get it back in the gun, or at least recover it later. You'll see some people that will want to load like this. I don't agree with that technique, because if I drop this round, it's just on the ground. Obviously, reloading 1 round at a time is a lot slower than using a speed loader. And if you can get speed loaders, I would certainly encourage you to get them. But this is a technique that I think is important, and I think it needs to be practiced. And if it's going to be practiced somewhere other than on a live fire range, it requires dummy ammunition. There's a lot of dead refrigerators, dead television sets, and unfortunately dead pets that if they were alive could testify to the dangers of trying this drill at home with live ammunition. Now there's 3 more things I want to add. First, I was using an HKS speed loader. I used those because I'm familiar with them, because I consider them to be high quality, because they're readily available in a wide variety at my local stores, and they're reasonably priced. There's many different designs of speed loaders, and different people like different kinds. Secondly, when demonstrating some of the techniques that I've demonstrated today, there are people that disagree with what I'm doing, and one of the things I hear a lot is that you would never do that because you would never really count your rounds. The only thing I can say to that is that in any situation I've been in, I have counted my rounds. Other people might not. And third, when you talk about reloading, it brings up the question of how important is reloading? When a citizen is in a legitimate, citizen-involved, self-defense shooting, how many rounds would someone typically fire to successfully resolve that situation? And for the answer, you'll have to wait until we do Revolvers Part 3. So until then, don't try this at home on what you call a professional, and thanks for watching the Revolvers for Concealed Carry and Personal Protection video.